This is an introductory video on the horizontal bandsaw. I'm going to show you how to cut materials to the correct dimensions efficiently and effectively. One of the key considerations using a horizontal bandsaw is you must have the correct PPE on. You need your safety glasses, you need overalls, gloves while handling the material, but not whilst you're anywhere near to the blade, as it is a rotating machine. First thing we need to do before we can use our saw is we need to ensure we're powered on. In this instance we have a plug and an isolator on the wall, so I'm going to turn the isolator on. The saw is now receiving power. I also need to check there is an emergency stop on each saw. Now your saw may not look exactly the same as this and your control panel may not be the same, but the same controls should be in place. We have an emergency stop on the wall nearby, so if anything does happen that can be hit. We also have an emergency stop on the front of the saw. Now in this instance, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure it is not on, and I'm going to turn the saw on. On this particular saw, we have a swivel base, so we can release the base and we can rotate the entire saw to adjust the angle that we cut at. We also have a hand wheel to control our vise, and a quick release on the vise itself as well. A quick note before we begin cutting is that this saw has a coolant feed on it, as many saws do, and there's a little valve above the blade on each side that we can use to turn the coolant on or off. The coolant is soluble oil, the same as we find in a milling machine or a lathe, so you do need to take some cautious precautions when you handle it. Ensure you are wearing some nitrile gloves or something when you are handling a lot of the stuff. Not all material will use the coolant. Some material fares better without soluble oil for the cutting. Sometimes aluminium will fare better without it. Sometimes certain steels prefer no coolant. But it is very circumstantial, and you should talk to your tutor to establish whether you should be using coolant or not. We are now in a position to begin cutting some material. I have a piece of steel pipe bar here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place it into our vise on our machine. I'm going to get the position I want to cut roughly underneath the blade. I can then begin to tighten the hand wheel on our clamp to grab the material on the vise. Now, I'm going to loosen it off a little bit so that the material can still move, and then I'm going to check the position of my material to my blade. The way I'll go about this is I can use a ruler or a tape measure or a mark on the actual material, and I can check the length of the material as it sticks out from the blade. So that is about 150 millimeters. That's where I want my material to cut. So I will pinch the vise up on my material and make sure it is clamped securely. We need to ensure that the blade of our saw has adequate clearance to the material and it is not resting on the material when we start. We have control over the blade itself and how fast it falls using this mechanism here. Now on each saw it will be slightly different. You may have a dial on the control panel itself. On this particular saw I have a lever that I can turn and the blade will begin to fall. I also have a valve on this lever that allows me to control how fast the blade falls. So now it is moving slowly, I can open the valve up and it will begin to fall faster and faster. Note that it is important at all stages to ensure you do not allow the blade to fall too fast onto the material because it will begin to burn out. And also never put any weight down on the saw whilst it is cutting. Let the weight of the saw cut itself. Now when I'm happy and ready to begin cutting, I'm going to press the green button and I am then going to open the valve and let the saw fall slowly onto the material. We can now see that our saw has finished cutting and the blade stops cutting itself when it reaches the bottom of the bed. We have our finished cut piece. All we need to make sure of now is that we remove the burrs around the edge of the material as they are sharp. So we'll use a file to go over them burrs and then our part is ready for the next stage of production.